Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you for watching. Today we're going to talk about why is PTSD scary. Just as a reminder, I always write everything on the board here so you can follow along at home or wherever you're at. Write it down, or if you miss something you want to replay it, great. So why is PTSD scary? Well, the main thing is that it controls you. It completely controls the individual that has it. So much to the point that the person that has the PTSD, they're not themselves. Okay, it's the PTSD that takes over, and that in itself is scary because we as human beings like to be able to control every situation that we're in. And the scary thing about PTSD is that you realize you can't control anything. So, like for me when I was in the war, I had a hard time dealing with the fact that I really had no control over my destiny. I had no control over whether I was going to live or die. It wasn't up to me. So, that's the main reason, is that it controls you. Okay, there's two parts to that, and or I should say, two things that describe the reason why that happens. First of all is that when you have PTSD, you have to remember that your brain is an amazing organ. It remembers everything. And a lot of times I talk to people about PTSD, and I'll have people tell me, well, you can't heal from it because the memories don't go away. Part of that is true. A lot of times the memories don't go away. I mean, there's things that I remember vividly and other things I'm sure I've forgotten. But yes, you have the memories, okay? Most of them will not go away. The memories are not the problem. The problem is that those memories are emotionally charged memories, okay? From the emotion of the event that caused your PTSD. So that emotion, the emotional part of your memory, is what actually controls you, okay? And that's important to understand and realize because that's a key component to healing from post-traumatic stress. And we'll get into that a little bit more as we go down through my list here, and I'll discuss that a little bit. The second part to it is that we have to understand as human beings that we have an environmental genetic adaptation, which I call fight or flight response. And it's a response to perceived danger or fear. This is something, I used to be an archaeologist for about 20 years, so I've studied human beings now for almost 3 decades. And it's your fight or flight response is like I said, it's a genetic adaptation. So it's an adaptation your body makes to your environment without whether you realize it or not. And human beings have had this fight or flight response ever since our inception. So what I mean by that is anytime that you get into a situation where there is perceived fear, real fear, danger, your body kicks in and takes over, okay? And you have the decision to make. You're either going to stay and fight or you're going to run. And that's just something that's inherent in human beings. We're born with that. And this all relates to the next part, which is kind of a subset of these two things, and that is that all of these behaviors that you exhibit, as a response to fear, or danger, or something like that, these are all learned behaviors, okay? And this is also very important because you have to understand that your responses that you've learned them, whether you learned it through your parents, whether you learned it through society, whether you read it out of a book, whether, like me, being in the Marines and being trained to go to combat, I have responses to fear and to danger and those sorts of stimuli. And the reason for that is that, say, take take combat for instance. When you're in combat, you can't think. All right, you can't. You just start reacting because it's so crazy. It's so chaotic. It's not something that you're normally used to. It's like, what happened here? Where is this coming from? It's just, it sort of blows you away, and whether you realize it or not. And that's the same thing for any situation that caused you to have your PTSD. It was traumatic for you. So, these responses kicked in, your learned behaviors kick in, and all these things control you, okay? So, for instance, when I talked about learned behavior and training, a good example of that is Pavlov's dogs, okay? Pavlov had these dogs, and what he did is, I'll just summarize the experiment really quickly. I describe it more in my book here, Sword in the Anvil. But what he did was, he started, he had a series of bells that he rang when it was time to feed his dogs, more or less. And so he would ring the bell and give them food. And he did it to the point that in the future, anytime the dogs heard those bells, they began to salivate because they knew food was coming. And then he got it to the point where the dogs even started incorporating other noises and other things from their environment, and that triggered them again in the future when it happened to salivate, thinking food was coming, whether it was or not. And this is what I'm talking about in terms of training your brain. Whether, like I said, it's society that's done it, your parents, the military, if you're a police officer, firefighter, paramedic, nurse, doctor, whatever. Whoever or however you were trained. So, again, these three things, just to kind of sum it up, are the reason why it controls you. Emotionally charged memories, environmental genetic adaptations, which is our fight or flight, and learned behavior. Okay? And I wrote down here retraining your brain because it's very important as well. And retraining your brain is my 5th step in my 13-step foundation to healing. Because we must understand that if we learn these behaviors or these reactions to these stimuli called fear, danger, death, those sorts of things, then obviously we can retrain our brain to have different reactions to these sorts of stimuli. And that's one of the ways that we really begin to rebuild ourselves and to heal from our post-traumatic stress. So, because while this all sounds daunting and it sounds scary, and that it completely controls you, you can't heal from it, and that's how you overcome this control, is by healing your PTSD. And for instance, I'll just go through these couple steps here, and I'll discuss what I mean. So, with emotionally charged memories, you have to get rid of the emotion, like I said. The way you do that is you release it in constructive and healthy, natural ways. For instance, you can write, you can draw, you can paint, you can play the guitar, you can sing, cook, whatever it is you like to do that makes you happy, start doing it. Let that emotion out through whatever you're doing. So there was 2 things for me, for example, that I did extensively that I still do today. One of them is writing. That's how I started to heal from my post-traumatic stress. I started writing about it. And now look at me. I'm a full-time author. I've written 3 books. I'm working on a 4th. So that was one thing. The second thing was I like to cook. So I started cooking, because when I was cooking, I was at peace. I was totally focused on what I was doing. I forgot about everything else that was going on in my life or going on around me. So there's these little things like that that help you to not only release the emotion, but also escape from the trauma, from the pain, from the control, and whatever is going on in your life while you're trying to deal with the post-traumatic stress. Now, I describe things that you can exactly do in the process in more detail in my book, Sword in the Anvil here, if you want more information about that. And in terms of learned behavior, like I said, it was my 5th step. So, to my 13-step foundation to healing. So you got to basically retrain your brain. So, if you get in a situation where there's danger, you panic and run, you need to train your brain to have a different reaction to that danger. So, I described in some of my other videos and in my books as well about how the color orange used to bother me, and it was in my bedroom, and I would start to panic, and because it brought me back to the war. And so my bedroom then became a scary place for me. So I had to retrain my brain to understand that my room was peaceful. It's where I sleep, where I rest, where I relax. And I did that over a series of steps until eventually it quit bothering me. So that's sort of how we approach it, healing our PTSD, and that's also why these three things are why it's so scary, because it all relates back to this. It controls you. It literally controls you. You become a prisoner to it. You know, with me, it got so bad that I wouldn't leave the house for anything. I ordered my groceries online. I wouldn't talk to nobody. I didn't leave. Nothing. So I was a prisoner to the PTSD. I was a prisoner in my home. So, you know, the longer you let it go, the worse it gets. And for the person that's going through that, it's extremely scary, because you realize you have no control. You have no idea what's going to happen to you, or when it's going to happen. And that's key as well. That's part of the reason why I wouldn't leave, because I knew something was going to happen. I just didn't know when. I didn't know where. I didn't know how bad it was going to be. You know, and you know, for instance, I used to go to the grocery store, and I would panic. I'd be standing there in line with a basket full of groceries, and I would panic and run out. And then I'd have to go back to that grocery store, and people would remember me, and it was embarrassing. So, and then I was even more nervous, because now I knew they remembered me. Now I knew they were going to be watching me to see if I did it again, and that sort of thing. So, and there's a lot of other incidences I had over the course of the 20 years I was dealing with the post-traumatic stress. That's just an example. So for those of you out there who know somebody that has PTSD and goes through this, hopefully now you begin to understand why it's so scary, and sort of why, some of the reasons why they do the things they do, or they have the reactions that they do. And just by you understanding that, helps you to help them, because then you know how to avoid these sorts of situations. You know how to avoid these sorts of triggers. You also understand what's going on in their mind with all this, so that you can, you know, sort of help them out a little bit. Maybe start talking to them about things if they're willing to talk, or help them out with, you know, trying to release the emotions in healthy, natural ways, like I said, constructive ways, writing, painting, whatever it is, cooking, or be involved in those activities with them. So the one thing that I always heard a lot from people when I would have these panic attacks, or I'd get nervous, and I'd wanna just run out of a place or something. Like I remember one time I was at a mall. I was with a friend, and I panicked. I wanted to run out, and the first thing out of her mouth was that you're overreacting. No, I wasn't overreacting. The answer to that question is this person overreacting? Is no, absolutely not. Because it all relates back to this. The PTSD controls you. Okay? However, you know, the actions that you exhibit in certain situations, or reactions you have to triggers when you have the PTSD, those reactions may not necessarily be warranted for the situation that you're in, but your brain doesn't know that. Because remember, it controls you, right? What happens is when you have a trigger or a stimuli, something that triggers your reaction when you have PTSD, your fight or flight response that we talked about here, it's because your brain thinks you're back in that situation again, because it remembered that trigger, that fear, that color, that smell, whatever was there the time that your trauma happened. Your brain remembers that. And so it stores it away. So if you ever smell that smell again, see that color, hear that noise, be in that environment, your fight or flight kicks in, your response kicks in, and you start reacting or panicking or whatever the case may be. So you know, the situation may not call for your reaction, but again, you don't have any control over it, and that's important for people to understand when you're around people that, or you have people in your life that have PTSD. This is what's going on. You know, like I said, just down here, you know, your reaction may not be necessary for the current situation. Your brain still thinks you're there. Like for me, for instance, my brain still thought I was in the war. I'd hear a noise, I'd smell a smell, I'd see a color. I'd be in a certain room or environment, we'll say, with a bunch of people, or in line at a grocery store, and it was claustrophobic, and those sorts of situations and things kicked in my fight or flight. And because my brain still remembered those things from the war, still thought I was there, so it started having me react like I was back there. So that sort of you know, kind of sums it up. And like I said, the only way that we as individuals who have PTSD can stop that, and you can't stop it. because you can heal. I know, I did it. So, like I said, you have to overcome it / heal your PTSD, and we do that by releasing the emotion in constructive, healthy ways, like I had described, through writing, through painting, whatever it is that makes you happy. Because the more you do what makes you happy, the more you're gonna do it, and the more that you do it, the more you're gonna heal, and the better you're gonna feel. Like I always say, I've said it many times in some of my videos. I've mentioned it, several times in my book here, Sword in the Anvil, that your passion is the vehicle that transports you from pain to peace. So think about that for a while. And with that, I hope everybody enjoyed the video. I hope that you learned something from it. And I look forward to having you in my next video. Remember, go to my website, www.robertsaraki.com. Check out all the information there that I have, free information. I got all kinds of videos there as well. There's information how to listen to my radio show. I have my inspirational quotes there. There's information about my books there. I don't sell anything on the website. It's just for informational purposes only. There are instructions there if you want to order one of my books, if the mood strikes you. But it's mainly just information. So I highly encourage you to check it out. Again, www.robertsaraki.com. Thank you for watching, and have a good day.